Hello again, and welcome to episode 2 of Starfish and Coffee. My name is Sean Smith, and I've been a pop culture writer for 30 years now. Some of you will know me as the creator and editor of Burn, or maybe Zero magazine back in the 2000s, or more recently as the editor of Skin Deep. As in episode 1, I've hooked up with my knowledgeable disc-spinning hometown buddy JJ, and this week we're diving into music magazines to try and figure out whether they have a future that's brighter than ever, whether they killed themselves, or if video really did have its way with the radio star. But there's only one way to find out, so let's get it on. Hello, Darkness, my old friend.
Hello. So, Starfish and Coffee, maple syrup and jam.
Number 1 down.
Yep.
Number 2 on the rack. I want to talk about magazines this week. Because
you want to
I know
open
about
the pages.
I do, because I think there's a lot to be said. I really do. There's in fact, that was brought on this week, but I was out with the dog and I thought, I wonder if Kerrang are back on the shelf yet, and apparently not, and not for the foreseeable future either.
It's really strange when. Okay, we can't go into stores right now. I mean, we can't exactly go into Smith's or whatever and have a browse because they're not open. But even when they are open and you go in, there's a distinct lack of choice, I guess.
Yeah.
Is the word.
Well, I mean, from I don't know if you. I guess we can't go into Smith's, but we can go into Tesco and the other supermarkets. But the choice in there has always been 50% of what a specialist newsagent like Smith's is. But I don't know, I'm struggling I've not bought a magazine of any kind for a very long time now. The things that seem to be winning are maybe a sign of the times, the things like Men's Health, cycling mags, those kinds of things that are really chipping into the heart of what people are doing in a pandemic, I guess.
I presume so. I mean, it's a very strange one because we are talking specifically, obviously, music magazines.
We are,
and obviously we're in a situation where, if going back to the days where. Me and you were doing fanzines, and then obviously we got into the magazine world. At least, I don't know, maybe 40% of it would have been live gigs. And we would have been doing reviews, and we would have had photographers going to the show and doing that whole genre aside of it. Well, of course, that really doesn't exist right now. So,
no.
So in a music sense, it's kind of like I sometimes stand and I think, if we were doing a music magazine today, what would we be putting in it? What's really out there?
That's one of the things I can't quite wrap my head around, because there's still a lot to say, and this comes from when I put Burn out. My idea was that, and it didn't really pan out this way, but my original idea was, let's talk about everything but the music, because all the other magazines talk about the music and your latest album, and I know you're going to say it's the best album you've ever done, because that's what you do. But I want to talk to like Robin Zander about being a father, or to Danny from Cradle of Filth about picking his kids up from school, or those kinds of things. I really wanted to get into that, and I missed the goal by a mile. But I do think there are ways that the magazines could have kept going. I mean, I would be super into an interview with Gerard Way about how he put together Umbrella Academy. That is a perfectly legitimate story, even if MCR haven't got any material out, and it would have been a seller for me. So I think there's other ways, but I think what strangled it is because there are no live shows, there is no live show advertising revenue, which is probably 80% of their ad revenue, and that hurts when that disappears. I know because I've been there.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, it's as we found when we got into it seriously. When we were doing fanzines, it was simple because it was just we were talking about the things we loved, and we were going to our local club and venue, and basically just talking to the bands we loved, and that was that. And then we got into actually doing it for real, and realized that it was cyclonic, and it was all about the album comes out, which is then followed by the tour, which is in between 2 or 3 singles and some videos, and then the band goes off to other territories, and then they come back maybe on the next round, and maybe do a festival or two, Download or Reading and Leeds or whatever it was, and then they move on to the next record. And for us getting into that, we found that we were part of that machine.
Yeah.
And therefore the PR companies, who I still believe are part of the problem, not part of the solution, just wanted to guide us into talking about whatever the PR sheets said at that particular time, which was the album or the single. Or so every time we wanted to do what you or I wanted to do, which was what you just spoke about, which is deviate into lifestyle, tell us about your lifestyle, talk to us away, talk to us about what you're not talking to the other guys about.
That was the only way I saw a magazine working, when there's so much competition.
But it was always frowned upon, wasn't it?
Very much.
We asked, it was always frowned upon. It's like, no, that's not what we're here for. That's not what they were getting paid thousands of pounds to PR. They were getting paid to PR the record, to sell records. And so for us not really wanting to talk about the record kind of made us the enemy.
Yeah. I mean, I got first-hand experience of that is when I was with Skin Deep, I wanted to put Rob Zombie on the cover, who is tattooed to hell and back, so it's legit. And the PRs were just like, and I had this with Henry Rollins as well, which is they don't want to talk about their tattoos, and I'm like, well, you're missing the point, because neither do I. We can visibly see they're tattooed, and that's just my gateway into getting them into a magazine, which in my head was like, well, this is a whole other audience that you could preach to. You're not going to win any fans by being in Kerrang again. No offense to Kerrang, but you're not, because that audience is already converted. But to preach to a new 40,000 audience would have been a good thing, but no, you just couldn't get anywhere near them. But I wasn't going to lie about it, so you just give up in the end, and it's sad.
Yeah, the PR guys seem to always come back, and it was always I recall similar stories and looking at it the same way, and I recall to people going, "This is the #1 best-selling tattoo magazine in the UK, the #1." And at the end of the day, saying to them, this will be a cover story in the #1. And they were going, yeah, but how many of those people will go out and buy a record? And you kind of go, well, okay, I know your job is to sell records, and I know your job may be to sell tickets to concerts. I get that.
Yeah.
But what you're saying to me now is you don't want to put an artist in this magazine because they don't want to talk about tattoos, and you think that nobody reading it is going to be interested in buying their record. So it was always like, it seemed like we was always stuck in the middle.
Yeah. But when the only thing I was ever trying to do was maybe not sell an album or sell a ticket, but sell the damn artist, which has way more life in it than whatever you've got written on your PR sheet. If Rob Zombie, say for instance, who I have interviewed, is a really nice guy and he talks about stuff, and he would have talked about tattoos. I know he would. That's beside the point. That you could have won some people over who may have gone and bought the records based on the fact that they didn't even know who he was. But I don't know. Maybe it's a little bit off subject. I mean,
no, I don't think it is because I think you're hitting the crux of where it's failed and where we try to intervene was the fact that when I walk in, and I can always walk into the store and I can look at maybe 10 magazines and they'll all have the same artist on the cover.
Yep.
Especially the rock alternative magazines, and especially the big gun. Like let's say Iron Maiden's a big gun because they're a big gun. They've got massive spending power. And I'm not saying they buy covers, but the PR can get into every single magazine. And on every cover is a picture of the band, and the story's the same because the story's about the new album, and all 8, 9, 10 magazines are just talking about the same thing, the same record, even to the same member of the band, because he sat there all day doing 10 interviews on the bounce, one after each other, with these magazines. And so that is what drew the demise, because what's the point of buying a magazine that's just covering all the same records?
When I honestly feel if I'd been allowed access, that having done fencing, I could have got a great hour and a half out of Bruce Dickinson about that, and we'd have you'd have put the little box copy in. Iron Maiden have got a new album out, but talking to Bruce about fencing for an hour and a half, priceless, even if you don't like fencing.
Yeah, and
because it's just
and when
different.
you go to see, and subsequently when you go to see, I've been to see, Henry Rollins do his stand-up chat show. I've been to see his stand-up chat show, and at the end of the day, wow, do they go off topic and do they tell stories? Yeah. And in reality, we wanted to put those stories in print.
In print.
But the bloody PR people were like, no, what we want you to do. And in essence, you are slave. We were slave. You are slave to what they allow you to do. And you can't lie. Like you said, you've got to say what you're doing it for. You could lie. You and I could have lied many times. Said, we'll go and interview an artist and just talk about the record. And then we could have done the old Dave Lee Roth thing and got there and just talk about whatever the hell we wanted to. That would have been great, but we wouldn't have got the next artist on the list because they'd have just cut our legs off.
Exactly, yeah.
So
it's a lot of power that they have, isn't it?
You're damned if you do and damned if you don't. So you've got to play their game. But it led to the total demise. I mean, I was looking today at, obviously Uncut, Mojo, we had Q, we had a whole raft of again, magazines, and again, all covering the same artists.
I mean, there's a lot of them gone down. I mean, what we got? Rockstown still around.
Yes.
And good on them. Yeah. Good on them. I don't have any criticism of Rocksound apart from I'm too old for it. The end.
Yes.
It's aimed at young people into rock, and that's not me anymore. But they do a damn good job. They are what Kerrang was to me when I was that age, because Kerrang certainly isn't anymore.
No.
Metal Hammer did a good job. It always did what it said on the tin.
Well, they never deviated.
It wasn't.
I mean, they were exactly. No. They were like, we are metal, we are Hammer, done.
But just sort of uh, rewinding way back. My lifeline was, and probably even before Kerrang came out. Actually, you had I'd buy Record Mirror, I'd buy NME, I'd buy Melody Maker and Sounds. So, which is quite a lot. They were all weeklies, I believe.
Yes.
And then Kerrang came along in the early 80s, which changed quite a lot.
1980, yeah.
And that was pretty much it for me. That was my solid diet until I got a little bit older, and I guess the world became a little bit smaller, and I was able to find access to Hit Parader, Circus, and I can't remember what the other one's called because it was so bad. What's the one with the editor who used to just put a picture of her with the biggest rock star she could find? You know the one I mean.
I do, yeah.
Metal Edge.
Yeah, Metal Edge.
Those stateside mags were again another a different thing. They were nothing like our magazines, but the point is there was an absolute thirst there for knowledge and as much as you could get. You know, when you're buying 8, 9, 10 mags or newspapers a month, that's a lot of money when you've got no money. And you know, you have to resort to shoplifting and other underhand tactics, like reading it in the shop and deciding if you actually really want it or not. But we're not there anymore. I don't think we ever will be again.
Well, it's funny. It's strange you should say that. There's a moment, and I will go off kilter here. There's a moment from one of my favourite things that I've watched, The Queen's Gambit. I know you watched it and loved it.
Yep.
And there's a moment where she goes into the store, and there's a chess magazine. Yep. she goes back and she literally steals the chess magazine from the store and takes it home
because it's important.
And I remember doing that was so many times, and it made me laugh because that's what we used to do. It was kind of like, I'm not paying. You know, I never wanted to pay for Hit Parader. I mean, strange enough, Hit Parader started in 1948, 1950. It started before NME. Yes. It was really old.
Crazy.
Well, I mean, I never wanted to pay for it at the end of the day. But so it was kind of like if ever I was in the store, it was kind of like if I could get away with putting that inside another magazine and walking out, that was exactly what you did. But you are right. I mean, people do forget that, you know, like Kerrang was a Sounds one-off special. It sold so well that they decided to do it monthly. It ended up, in its first year, it was ending up selling 300,000 copies a month. Now, that is a phenomenal amount of sales to sell.
That was probably more than a lot of the artists were selling.
Yeah. You know,
but you know,
ridiculous.
But that made them, those sorts of numbers made them very brave.
Yes.
In a way that no other magazine has ever been.
No.
To sort of go, oh, it's Tuesday. Who should we stick on the cover? We'll put Robin George on the cover.
Yeah.
And if it's wrong, who cares? Because it'll be Tuesday again in 5 days. And we'll put something else on and everyone will have forgotten.
Yeah. Well,
but in hindsight, it made for a massive cultural wedge of awesomeness.
The Prince cover always resonates with me. The fact that...
Yeah, there was a lot of kickback at the time, wasn't there?
Yeah, you know, the fact that the Kerrang put Prince on the cover for me was defining, was absolutely a defining moment in music history. But you are right in the fact that, you know, we had obviously NME and then Sound started in 1970 and turned into the rock version of it, you know. And meanwhile, like you say, in America, there was Cream and Rolling Stone, which both started in the late 60s. But for me, the importance of it was, you know, people do forget. I know I'm an old person, as you know, way back when, but people do forget that we had 3 TV channels, we had 2 music shows. One was Top of the Pops, and one was the Old Grey Whistle Test. The only way you got to find out about artists that were on was by actually, like you say, picking up Record Mirror, NME, or Sounds, and you got to read a 3 to 4 page in-depth interview and kind of found out who Sting was, or found out who Cheap Trick were, where they were from, what they were doing. And, you know, you found out what Bowie was doing in Berlin. It was your way of actually connecting the dots.
Yeah.
There was no other
Which
way.
begs the question. It does make you, I mean, and that was fantastic. But if we were to sit here and knock the next generation down for just using their phone and YouTube, which is exactly what we would have done, then that would be wrong. But so the big question is there a place for music mags in 2021 and going forward? And the reason I think there is because in print you do live forever. Yeah. I've said it a million times. Nobody rings their mum and goes, "Oh, mum, I'm on NME.com." That just doesn't happen. That's just the web page. It's useful. You can see the video and you can read a big interview, but it doesn't mean anything because there's a million other. No one is singling out 5 pages out of 100 and saying, "This is worth these 5 pages. We are giving you time and space. You're special this week. There you go."
I have a theory that completely. I'm in complete and utter agreement with you, but I have a theory about digital publications or websites, like I do about MP3s, and I can go to my collection, and I see it when I go to see lots of bands. I see lots of people doing the same, both young and old, by the way, not just 40, 50-year-old. I see 20-year-old, 25-year-old kids, you know, doing it, or, you know, young, or whatever you want to say. And that is, I never have got an MP3 signed, but I've got lots of albums signed. And I have never got a digital publication or a website signed, but I have covers of Sounds and NME that I took, and I wanted Joe Strummer to sign the cover of that magazine, or I wanted Gene Simmons, or whoever my go-to was at that time, because it mattered to me, because I had something tangible, and they're tangible. And so as that moment in time moves on, that's the only tangible evidence in reality that you have. And a selfie isn't enough, and an MP3 isn't enough.
No, it's a peculiar one, isn't it? Because I also think Always Outlaw magazine really grabbed hold of the lion's tail. They went subscription only. It was a premiere price, but you know, fair enough. It was quarterly, or it is quarterly. I see they stopped publishing as well. I don't know if that's permanent or not. That will sort of come out in the wash, I guess. But I thought that was the way forward: creating a magazine where you sell direct to the fans, where the store isn't taking 60% of your cover price. You're in control, and it's from me to you. And that was a quality publication, and you know, because of the kind of things they were featuring, which you know is Chris Barris, who's around, Paul Stanley, David Coverdale, at that level, and those sorts of people, you could keep putting it out. You could have kept going, and I think they've lost some momentum there. They stopped posting on Instagram, which made me think that mag's dead. Maybe not, you know, but a little bit of a proof of life would go a long way to picking it up again.
Like anything, I guess, like the you know, the vinyl revival, if you like, the cassette tape revival, you know, all the physical formats in music that have come back around. CDs are still holding on. You know, I mean, AC/DC just had a number one album. They sold 70,000 a number one album. 60,000 of those copies were physical CDs or vinyl. So it just shows you that it is possible.
Yeah.
And so, if the interesting thing for me is if you take a company like BandLab, who are an Asian, Australasian, Japanese kind of company, who have bought NME.
Yep.
Now they're all raised on Burn magazine, not that Burn, but the
Yep.
B with the X, the Burn with the X magazine, which has been going
Another
since
one.
the mid-80s, is a publication. It's
Yep.
printed in Japan. It's in Japanese, and it's constantly out. It's never stopped at any given time. It's kind of the number one selling music magazine in Japan, and of course, sells in other territories. But because BandLab have come in, they've come in with an attitude that is actually, we want to take Enemy, and they bought Uncut, and they bought into lots of different things, and they are very, very about physical, and they're not about digital at all.
I know. A Japanese company bought Rolling Stone as well, but I'm not sure it's the same.
It's not the same company. No, it's not the same company.
No, but they I picked up the first couple of issues, and it was like, okay, this is veering back in the correct direction now.
And I think interestingly, with what they've just recently done, and just recently come up with this new way of doing things, which of course has been met with such anger. Oh my God, because
Aye, me included.
When you look into it, what they are simply doing is they're doing advertorial. They're basically saying, you give us $2,500 a year, you supply us with, copy, you supply us with it. If we think it's good enough, we will use it. So they're putting the gauntlet down, basically to kind of say to people, show us what you've got. Because
now that's where I have the problem with it, because I could raise $2,500, and the one thing I always wanted to do was write for Rolling Stone. But that was it. And then when Rolling Stone got a bit rubbish, I didn't. But that was
you and I always thought we could save it when it went not so good.
Yeah, but I just turned the mag I was working on into Rolling Stone instead. But now I'd kind of still like that. But if I give them $2,500, and they're saying, if we like it, we'll use it. That's the problem. Then if they don't like it, I'm $2,500 in the hole for nothing. That's not a good deal.
I get in a way, but looking like the guy who's done it, and the published piece they did for the guy who runs the cannabis farms, and has got a huge business and stuff.
Yeah,
it's a really, really good article. And he's obviously a really, really good writer. So I think at the end of the day, it's standing on your ability. And if you're, and we all want to be Lester Bangs, and we all want to be Cameron Crowe. Of course we did. Almost Famous. It's still my number one movie for all time. We all want, but we're all not that good. But what it does say is, show us what you've got. Give us a feature. And if that one doesn't work, give us another one. So they're kind of saying to the writers, come on. Don't just sit there, pile it in. And so I saw it as a gauntlet. And I was kind of sitting there going, well, okay, you mother funkers. Then I would quite happily throw something at them every couple of weeks. And if they said no, I'd be like, okay, next.
I wonder if there's a train of thought that says, let's take Nick Hornby, because he's a good example. He can write. He's written a bajillion things. He's gone very quiet lately, but I can't remember who he's published with. Maybe Penguin, but Penguin have the sort of clout business. Lots of people who can sit around going, "Hey, if we throw $2,500 at Rolling Stone, Nick could write some articles. He's got a new book out. Bingo!" And what I'm trying to say is
Yes.
we've taken journalism from, or music criticness from Lester Bangs in his bedsit with an album that he loved, into the stratosphere of something else entirely. And maybe that's just because
Well,
it's
it's Lester Bangs
2021.
in his bedroom, but
Because the bedsit thing is
what
online
he's
now.
actually,
Everyone's got a
but
website or
what
a
he's
blog
got
or
in the cupboard isn't an album he loves. It's an album he wrote. And that's
that's
what
very
it is.
true.
It's a bit like
Good point.
you sitting on Black Dye White Noise. And the reality is you're only giving them copy because you want to sell your book. And at the end of the day, by being in that flagship publication, it puts you in front of literally millions of people, because their followers that they've got on their socials adds up to millions. And if
And I guess $2,000 to write an article about your cannabis farm is better than spending $2,000 on advertising on a
absolutely,
page. It's more
because he gets
real.
to say to his friends, doesn't he, look at me. It's that's what you're buying into, isn't it?
Do you know what?
What have you got to sell? I think it comes down to
I'll
what you've got to sell. And I think the people who have done it, the guy who's doing space travel, the guy who's doing SpaceX and all that kind of stuff, who's in with the Tesla guy, he's got a published. Yeah. And what he's interested in selling is space travel. And so I guess it's, what have you got to sell? And I saw that, what have you got in your locker? So it's just a way in to sell what you really want to sell, not to be Lester Bangs, if that makes sense.
That's true. And the other thing is that Rolling Stone is no longer a rock magazine.
No, not at all.
Not really. I mean, they did have, I know he doesn't do a lot for them anymore, but Matt Taibbi is probably the best political journalist
Absolutely.
the world has ever seen. He left, set up his own Substack, which is an internet site where you write and people contribute, people subscribe. So they give him $5 a month and they get to read all of the things he writes about American politics. And it's
of course it is. And 100,000 people plug into it, and 100,000 times $5 is a lot of money. You know what I mean?
It is a month. I can't work it out. What is it?
It's ridiculous. Because it's basically, again, isn't it? It's what have you got that you want to make money from, and it literally is an advertorial. That's all it is. And again, I do empathise and do see why writers and journalists are angry, but in reality, if they've got books on the shelf that are gathering dust, that aren't selling, or if they're self-publishing or however they're doing it, or even like you said about Nick, they've got something coming out, they should really, really be kind of going, I'm going to do something here because this could help me shift a lot of copies of my product.
It's an interesting model. It'll be even more interesting to see if anyone else picks up on it.
Yeah.
Especially when I know they're not specifically a music mag, but GQ isn't that different than Rolling Stone anymore. They hold the bar so high. GQ is just, having been an editor, publisher, whatever, the bar of GQ is so up in the sky. It's unbelievable. It's like every month. It's like Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon. It's got massive production values. They must spend so much money making a great magazine that it just puts all the others to shame at the moment, which is a weird thing to say because mags they're meant to be disposable. They're meant to be bought at the train station and left on the train. That it's just what there was before there was the internet. Apart from people like you who kept everything ever.
But even given that, like you say, given that mentality, there's still a reason to keep something. and and everything, like you said, has become so disposable that why would you keep a copy of something? And I think you tapped into it before when you said about rock sound, you know, and I know me and you look at rock sound very different reasons, because we're looking at it not just from content, we're looking at it from a design
Yeah,
sensibility as well as
yeah,
content, and we're looking at the size of the photographs, and is it black and white, is it color? We're looking at it from
yeah.
a vast amount of different reasons, but given those reasons, those are the reasons that make you want to keep something, because it holds you. It really does hold you. And GQ is in that bracket, isn't it? Is the fact that you look at it and you go, man, the quality of the photography, the editorial, the way somebody has poured their heart and soul into putting that together. And like you said, it matters.
It does, but it's for me it's weird because we used to put every mag I've ever done has been done
Yeah.
by 3 people. Like an editor, someone who designed it,
Yes.
and someone who sold the ads, and a bunch of freelancers. But when you look at GQ, there's like
Yeah.
100 people working on it. So you can't compete at all. But is there a future for music mags? With the internet is
But the
here, it
free
ain't going
again, the free
anywhere.
model. If you
The,
go and look at, if you go into if you go and look at, DIY magazine or Upset magazine or any of the ones that you can go and pick up for free, they do well enough to get enough money
yeah,
every month to keep hanging it out and putting it in their locations in cities around the country, and and making it work. Okay, the tap's been turned off now, and I do understand that, Loud and Quiet and a lot of them of because like you said, they've had the advertising tap has been turned off because at least 50% of it was for live shows, so they've got nothing to sell. But in reality, those magazines, those free magazines, are still coming out and are still doing. I still constantly do pick up copies of Discovered magazine, or like I said, Upset, or DIY, and I constantly see them still there. So they are hanging on, and they're essentially, you pick them up for nothing. And
yeah. I guess it depends why you want the mag to be. I mean, when I did my first one, it was because I thought there was something missing. No one was doing it. I'll do it myself. All right, it took me a few years, to say the least, to get it off the ground. But I did it for the love of magazines and the music. But having done it for years,
no,
I wouldn't do that again. Now, because I've done it for love and for the right reasons, now it would
yeah,
have to be for the money, which you might say is selling out. But those magazines died because there
yeah,
was no fucking
yeah,
money.
yeah.
You can't
But
you
like you
can't have
said,
it
though,
both
music
ways.
magazines,
You just
the
can't.
the hardcore music magazines like Mojo and Uncut are music magazines. That's what they talk about. But they end up doing a 10
Yeah,
page in depth look at Dark Side of the Moon by Pink Floyd, which you've read 100 times. So they just are basically raking over stones that have already been turned over time and time again. Or here's some Queen pictures from Mick Rock that you've seen so many times, because there's only so much. But a lot of the other music magazines have diversified into fashion, into politics, into areas that music fans who knew it, are interested in more than music. Yeah, and they've
Jesus,
really,
really.
yeah,
I've got a great idea for a
Why
magazine.
didn't we think of that? But they've done it by default because they've had to, and because they've got
Yeah,
young bands and artists that's what they're interested in. That's what they are gravitating towards. So those artists want to talk about stuff that isn't just music. They want to talk about fashion. They want to talk about politics. They want to talk about depression. Youngblood, classic example of an artist who is phenomenal, right? He's done a
Yep.
great album. He's so plugged into the world, and he's so plugged into climate change and into everything else that at the end of the day, and Post Malone, you know what I mean, and 21 Pilots. So I
Yep.
think a lot of
Yep.
those artists have led the way into music magazines. What they've actually done, and this sounds crazy when you say it, even when I say it out loud, they're basically going to the artists and saying, "What do you want to talk about?" And that's the change.
Yeah.
And the artists are kind of going, "This is what I want to talk about." So they're not going in with an agenda. They're just going along and saying, "We are XYZ magazine. We realize your artist, Mr. PR company, has got a record out. We would like to talk to him." The PR guy goes, "I'll set up an interview." The phone goes, or they go along and they go, "Right, what do you want to talk about?" And they don't go in on the premise of anything. And what's happening is the artists are then sometimes coming out with 5 or 6 pages, and all they've talked about is climate change. But of course, as an editor, you would go back to the PR guy and go, "Hey, what do you want me to do?" That's what they talked about. And so there's a raft of young PR people as well who are going, "Well, actually, I'm not that bothered," because they've got Instagram, they've got Facebook, they've got Twitter. We're hammering.
They're doing their own talking. They're selling their own
Yes.
albums on their platforms, aren't they? Now they're just backing it up instead.
So in many respects, they want them, in some respects, to talk about something that isn't the sell and the product, because that's what makes that piece interesting. Because then when the record company goes, "Oh, are we going to do some promo on this DIY feature on Youngblood?" Well, they do push it, and the record company pushes it, and the socials push it, because he's spending 2 hours talking about climate change, which he's not doing anywhere else. So it has changed, honestly. It really has.
Go on. But do you think that when we sit here and go, sounds was fantastic and Kerrang, to a slightly younger audience, they'd probably give us that look that we used to give people who go, I used to watch Ready, Steady, Go on a Friday night. He's like, Christ, that's so last generation.
From the young guys and from the young males and females that I talk to, that I meet when I'm out and about, that write for these magazines, no, because they all cite, they've all bought back copies of magazines to read a Joe Strummer interview from 1984 or whatever, and they've all got that, and they've all seen Almost Famous, and they all actually want to matter. They all want to matter in the world, and they want someone to say, "Oh, you're just not a guy who turned up and did a review of a gig and said that album's 7 out of 10 or whatever." They actually want to make their mark on the artist and the world, and they want to actually sit down with Tom York and do the Young Americans interview with David Bowie, which was 45 years ago, when the album came out. They want to do their version of that, because to them, that's what matters. Because when it goes on socials, they need their feature to not just be the same as everybody else.
I got a new album. It's fascinating. I think the whole world is just coming into. You're in a brand awareness place now. Soon it won't matter whether Roxanne was a rock mag or GQ is I'm not actually sure what GQ is.
No,
it's a different beast. But if Roxanne carried an interview with Tom York and GQ did, both totally legitimate. There you can find Tom York in The Guardian. He's quite welcome in Cosmopolitan. You could find him on, I don't know, Question Time, probably with whoever hosts that. we're getting to a place now where everything is fair game if it's interesting, and there's so many outlets everywhere that you can get as much as an artist is
Yeah, and
willing to
it's
give, I
and it's
guess.
because the new breed are not painting themselves into a corner in the first place by just going, well, we're just going to
No,
talk to Metallica and Slayer, or we're just going to talk to, Taylor Swift and Pink or whatever. They're not painting themselves into any corner musically or any corner lifestyle
because
because you
it's
can't.
dangerous to do that.
Otherwise, you're talked about in the same
No,
terms that we're doing with magazines that stopped being able to move forward. NME, tried its best to move forward, but every time it put something on the cover that wasn't indie or alternative, it got ripped apart by people who were just like, this isn't the NME. And so they had no way forward.
yeah,
There was no way forward for them because they were just going to get pulled apart unless they kept doing the same thing. And Planet Rock's the same in many respects. That's gone for the same reason. You know what I mean? Classic rock magazine suffers from it because it's the same 20 bands over 2 years that end up being on the cover.
I'm not sure how they're still going, really, but I guess that speaks to the demographic of people who are, 40
Yes.
to
Yeah.
65,
But it'll be
70,
interesting to see if they do come. The interesting thing
who,
is what they come back as. I'm fascinated. Kerrang is owned by the people who obviously own Mixmag magazine.
no, sorry, this is the point of the whole thing. Because of the virus, we've had
Yeah,
a brick wall has been dropped on the planet. Who is gonna come back from this? And I think they could all come back, but I think they might find their audience doesn't need them anymore. That's the
but
important thing.
if
I
they could,
think.
well, I'm going to say this because I'm an arrogant mother funker, right? They could all come back and burn wanted to. This is their moment. This is their moment
Yeah,
to adapt and reinvent and come back and step into the new world and kind of go, no, that's who we were. This is who we are. And they're the ones that will survive, who don't care and don't listen and turn off the talking heads and just go, this is what we're doing and this is where we're going. And those are the ones that will survive. And that is why,
I agree.
while I'm not pro or anti what Rolling Stone are doing, that's why I'm into what they're doing. Because they're going, you know what? We're going this way. Come with us or don't. But we're going this way. It's burn, man. It's what we wanted to do. No outside interference. We do what we
It
do.
is, and even in this short hour, I've kind of just talking about it. I've kind of changed my mind, and I was very, great. You want to write for Rolling Stone? The idea is you write something and they pay you, and you go,
Yeah.
I'm good enough to be paid for this. But now,
Yeah, of course.
which meant a lot and still does. But now they're saying, give us money and we'll give you a shot. I was dead against that, but I think I was thinking about it in too small a way. Because when you're, I don't know, let's say me from small town in Wales, why the fuck should they pay me money to write something when people live in New York and LA and have an opportunity of bumping into Pink in the 7-Eleven or knocking over her groceries and writing a story? Nothing ever. It's a different beast.
Well, it's the gene thing, mate. We always come back to some kind of Kiss connection, and it's the gene thing. When Gene says we're playing tonight to 20,000 people, it's a sold-out show. 10,000 will turn up early. Do you want to play to 10,000 people, or do you want to go to that club up the road and play to 100 people? I'm giving the opportunity here to stand on this stage, 10,000 people, sell them what you do, because they're all here to see us. So if you want it, but that's going to cost you money, sunshine. But if you want the platform, here it is. If you don't, fine. Stay over there to 100 people and tell everybody that we're just money and this, and tell everybody what you want. But for every band that says no, there's 100 that says yes. And that is the platform. Yeah, and if you want to stand on that stage...
That's a good analogy. That's a good analogy.
You know what I mean?
I guess a lot of people probably think that when a band goes out, that their support band is there because the main band like them.
Yeah.
I thought that for the longest time when I was a kid. But
it is true. You know, when you watch the guys, and, you know, Paul and Gene talk about Judas Priest and AC/DC and some amazing opening acts that they love.
Oh, sure, but the point is they weren't there for free, right?
They all paid to stand on that stage, regardless. Whether they loved it or they didn't.
Yeah, totally. It's I don't know. It's everything is changing, and it's hard. And it's hard not to be nostalgic about all the things that you thought were great. Lester Bangs was a hero. And Cream is my favorite magazine ever, probably because it was kind of like a Mad magazine version of a rock mag, in that it treated you like you were stupid when you were really the smartest person in the world, because you got the joke. When they took the piss, you understood it because you were so deep in the music that was the only way you could do it. It was so idiotically brilliant. Whereas, Rolling Stone, was the complete opposite. It took itself very seriously, and maybe that's why Cream died. And Rolling
probably.
Stone
There's a lot of that.
But it's always hard not to be nostalgic. I even find my kids are nostalgic. Things change so quick. My eldest is 24, and even she gets nostalgic for things 4 years ago. Even for her, rock sound has changed in those 4 years to a thing that she doesn't.
I'm kind of opposite. I don't get nostalgic in that way. What I do, my thing is when I remember reading a Clash interview from 76 or 77 in Sounds or NME, I want somebody to be reading about the Blinders or the Red Rum Club or whatever the latest version of that is. In a magazine now, I want someone out there to be reading something that feels how I did, and
from my point of view, I'd like people to pick something up, read it, and go, God, I want to do that. I want to be part of that. I mean, when you were born in small town North Wales, as we both were. And you read about this place called the 100 Club, which is the greatest name ever. It allows you off piste because everyone knew, let's go to the marquee. But the 100 Club was a different beast. It was like the alternate to the alternate. It was a weird one. I don't know. It's just things are just changing so fast. I fear for the future of music magazines as they were, and that is because I think the internet has replaced them and everything they did in such a big way that the numbers of people buying them can't support the ecosystem that it needs. You can't pay the writers enough. You can't send photographers to Berlin anymore because it's just not there.
Because I think
we're never going to have
another music magazines like vinyl and cassettes. I think music magazines will come back stronger and better than ever because they'll just convert into something that they weren't, and in many ways they'll go back to what they were doing it for in the first place.
And there you have it. Did we find the answers we were looking for? Maybe. We sure as hell touched some live wires along the way. But the future, as always, is very much unwritten. We'll be back again next week with more kitchen table philosophy. In the meantime, you can hit that subscribe button, tell a friend if you like what we're doing, and we'll see you next week. Be cool to each other.